war and tension in the Middle East and the situation around Jerusalem in Palestine. There is the escalation of war on Venezuela. There is the abolishment of the Iran nuclear deal. There is the reneging on the climate change agreement, and so on and so forth. There are lots of reasons why many people will be taken to the streets to oppose Trump. But the reason I want to focus on is what the former speaker spoke of and what the chair mentioned in his introduction, which is racism. And I think it's important for us to understand why racism is being used and why Donald Trump is making the statements and comments that he's making, like comparing Mexican children to insects and animals and locking them up and describing them as an infestation and this sort of dehumanizing descriptions of Muslims, black people and Mexicans and all immigrant communities. And it's because, and I think this is sometimes a bit misunderstood by people, because often there's a counterposition between racism and class, whereas actually racism has actually gone hand in glove with the oppression of working class people. And so what's happened in the post-war period was that a lot of investment was going into the welfare state and the living standard of, working people and the 99%. So in the US, people generally were actually becoming better off. And the same was happening in Western Europe, including Britain. We saw the creation of the NHS, which is a huge benefit, obviously, to society, and something that, we're being forced to defend now, and we should defend it because our lives depend on it. But other things like, in relation to the welfare state, people were becoming better off, and similar things were happening in Europe. There was a lot of investment going into improving the lives of working class people. And then when you had Thatcher and Reagan, obviously there was a shift away from that. People were actually their living standards were becoming attacked. You had a shift away from that approach. And I think what Donald Trump and his supporters in Europe, including here in Britain, stand for is actually making the 99% worse off and the 1% better off, and actually using racism as a cover for that approach. So Donald Trump, instead of providing a solution to the crisis of living standards that the US population are facing, just provided a scapegoat.
Young members and how we can in particular target them and why we need to keep Trump off our streets. Having the Free Tommy Robinson fascists marching on our streets just shows how much America has an influence to the British people, and that itself shows how every single person in this room has a responsibility to keep Trump off our streets. By the Prime Minister allowing this absolute idiot into this country, it shows the rest of the world that we accept his action by banning Muslims, by forcibly taking children away from their families, where the vast majority of us don't. I'm actually proud that young people will be marching out of their schools to join us on the march on July 13th. For now, what we need to be doing is targeting 11 to 16-year-olds in educating them and just to put an immense pressure on the Prime Minister. And to show her, what, this generation actually cares, and this generation won't be the stereotypical white men marching, it will be all of us here today. And I feel like stand up to racism and stop the war coalition and stand up to Trump. We need to educate young people and just engage them on a larger scale. And from there, once you educate them, they'll be like, yeah, you know what, this actually matters to us and we actually care about this, therefore we'll be out there marching alongside with us. That's it. Thank you.
Right, just to echo on some of Sabi's points, so the numbers of people that came out in June to free Tommy Robinson are quoted between 15,000 to 40,000. I don't know how many were there. What I can say is it was a lot. And this is one of the biggest mobilisations of the far right in a generation, and people are even saying that it was probably bigger than what Mosley had back in the day. So this is happening in our time. This is happening when we don't just need to rely on TV and only have 4 channels. We have got so much information coming our way, where we have got a plethora of TV channels, satellite channels, 24-hour TV, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We have seen this, and we cannot ignore it. This is something we have to say that we've got to fight, because if people did not fight it in the generations before us, whether it was our father's generation, our grandfather's generation, then we know that there would be a lot of differences in our community today. I think Sabi touched on it quite well, but I think I just want to kind of go on about it a little bit more. This wasn't a bunch of people that just thought, oh, let's kind of like do a quick raffle and see if we can all kind of get a coach together to go down to London to free Tommy Robinson. This was organised. This was thousands, hundreds of thousands of pounds of media equipment, of staging, of big screens. They had people flown in from Europe, from far right places in Europe. They are being bankrolled by the biggest amount of fascists across Europe and in the US. There is links to Marie Le Pen, there is links to Steve Bannon. This is a highly coordinated operation. This is not a bunch of people that have had too many lagers down the pub and just want to do a bit of smashing up. This is serious stuff, and it's happening right under our noses. At the last demo in June, whether it was 15,000 or 40,000, it was a damn lot more than the 200 or 300 that were on the other side. 200 or 300 anti-racists. That could never happen again. They cannot be emboldened to think that they could come into London and only be challenged by 200 or 300 people, because once you allow them to pass, then they will continue to infect everywhere.
This is really problematic. We criticised Trump for his immigration and customs enforcement, which was actually set up in 2003. It's not actually his policy, he's just continued it. But again, we ignore that, well, recently it was reported that the bail for immigration detainees in the UK is also separating parents from children. In this country, it's happening. The Home Office has, as we know, an appalling record and has caused untold misery and confusion and suffering. And also just have to remind you, remember those immigration mugs from Miliband? Rendition programs. So, you know what I mean? We have had here the so-called progressive left-wing politicians, like you said, the establishment, essentially validating these arguments from the right, and this is a beast that's been left to grow. So I'm nearly finished, but I just want to finish off by saying, you know, we also deny, we also criticise, rightly, so don't get me wrong, rightly criticise Trump for denying climate change and pulling out of the Paris Climate Agreement. But yet, we've just seen half of the Labour Party has just voted with this Tory government to approve Heathrow expansion, knowing that this will compromise our ability to meet our climate targets. We criticise Trump for deepening inequality, rightly so, again, but we don't confront the deepening inequality in our own country, and the fact that of all the 5th worst boroughs for inequality in London are all controlled by Labour MPs and Labour majority councils. And if you wanted to know, Brent is the 4th most unequal borough in the whole of London, according to the One Elite Trust. So what are we doing about that? What are we connecting the dots? You know, to challenge Trump, we have to relocate our own humanity. For the Greens, we do this by creating policy that is guided by 4 pillars: democracy, peace, social justice, and the environment, because I believe what else is there? And to just finish, I'm rightly for criticising Trump and protesting against everything he stands for and standing with everybody in this room, united, as you said. I feel like we do need to be united on this. However, I also want to fight the injustices that can be found on our own doorstep, the social, political, and environmental injustices that are happening in this country and on this continent as we speak. So please let us not forget that. And let's challenge Trump, but let's also put forward and enact policies and ideas that would diminish his support and also address the hypocrisies of our time. Thank you very much.
The reality of Donald Trump is, actually, he's not the biggest problem, is it? It's the people behind Donald Trump that are the real issue. The people who are controlling him and, you know, the people who he actually represents. You know, despite the politics that he said was going to improve the lives of so many people, the reality is the policies that he's moved has been all about benefiting the rich and the wealthy and the powerful, as it's always been. And unfortunately, the choice that the Americans were faced with was the continuation of the status quo, which was, you know, a continuation of in-work poverty, a continuation of having to do 4 or 5 jobs just to try and make ends meet, to meet the rent payments, you know, or Donald Trump, who was saying, you know, I'm anti-establishment, I struggle for something else, or I'm a billionaire, and I don't know what it's like to struggle. But, you know, understand that, you know, I'm not part of the political system. But actually, when you look at his history, he's always been part of the political system. You know, he's always been supported by the banking sector. He's always been the person that they push forward, you know, as a general distraction. I mean, you know, we called Nigel Farage a pound shop Enoch Powell. I mean, I suppose we could describe Donald Trump as a pound shop Adolf Hitler. Because I think, you know, when you look at his policies, you know, caging children, I mean, where have we seen that before? Obviously in Europe. I'm not one to stop because I get into trouble when I link some sorts of politicians with fascist dictators of the past. Apparently you can't do that. But, you know, when you see a fascist, I think you should call them out. A fascist is a fascist, and Donald Trump is a fascist. And, you know, it's right that people are actually organising across this city and across the country to protest about him. You know, it is a shame that he's not actually going to be here, you know, to see that. But I'm sure in Oxford he will meet quite a few people that will be there to make his life a misery. Because he shouldn't enjoy his time in the UK. Because, you know, despite some of the rhetoric that we hear in our press, some of the people that seem to get the media attention, the reality of the UK is that the people here are a welcoming people. You know, we support and stand in solidarity. Whenever there's an issue in any community, what you always see is the community coming together. It's the irrelevance of where you were born. You know, whether you were born in the UK or born outside in a different country, the reality is when people are in hardship, people stand together. Because the real